Chapter 1221, Dividing the Spoils of War. The anger displayed by Zhang Yi caused Qin Shigong to only be able to accompany him with a smile. What else could be said when reasoning was at stake? We definitely did not hide anything in this matter, I can swear with my military identity. And how could I dare to risk universal condemnation and victimize the pillars of the country? As soon as Qin Shigong's words were spoken, Zhang Yi, Li Changgong and Han Shanzhua looked at each other. After careful consideration, Qin Shigong's words were indeed reasonable. Even though Huaxu Kingdom was now divided into 6 regions, it was still a whole. The loss of a top mutant from any of the regions would damage Huaxu Kingdom as a whole. As the commander of the first region, Qin Shigong had no reason to do such a foolish thing. Li Changgong frowned, his eyes deadpan on Qin Shigong. We encountered an incredible existence in the underground world. Is this something that Xinjing doesn't know about at all? Qin Shigong shook his head. The mysterious existence you encountered is located at a depth of close to 20,000 meters underground. Even with our current technology, it's difficult to open a passageway to there through natural means. Do you think that it's possible for us to have information about them? Speaking here, he changed his words. However, our scientific research department did discover some information about underground creatures from amongst the various literature from ancient times. However, after a long period of time, many of the records about mysterious things were destroyed in fires. The accuracy of our information is doubtful, and the truly credible information is very limited. Li Changgong crossed his hands at his jaws and said quietly, as I recall, the 506 Research Institute in Xinjing is a department dedicated to the study of the occult, and has been created for more than half a century to date. I wonder if it would be convenient for Commander Qin to share the information you have collected with us. Hearing the 506th Institute, Zhang Yi raised his head fiercely to look at Li Changgong and Qin Shigong. Regarding that mysterious existence, he had once read some rumors on the internet. At the end of the last century, a great figure in the field of science and technology in Huaxu Kingdom created this department. It was said that it was established to explore human science like supernormal capabilities and also had research on various occult sciences. Originally, Zhang Yi thought that it was just a product of a special period of history. But unexpectedly, it has existed until now. Zhang Yi muttered in his heart, could it be that the country had discovered those special existences a long time ago, but just didn't disclose them to the public? His heart was greatly shaken. If one extrapolated deeper, perhaps the arrival of the end times was not even an accident. And the birth and research of mutants had been around even more since ancient times. What were those mysterious existences underground? And what was the relationship between them and humans? Zhang Yi's head was a messy mess, inextricably unable to find a connection. At the mention of Institute 506, Qin Shigong smiled sarcastically, there was indeed a structure like that. However, the time of its creation was too short, and it actually did not have too much depth in the field of occultism. This matter Qin Shigong could not fool Li Changgong either. This was because Li Changgong, as a high-ranking son of the Beijing Circle's origin, would not know any fewer mysteries than he did. Qin Shigong said in a deep voice, regarding the underground world, it is true that we do not have much information. Our Huaxu Kingdom has a long civilization, yet too much information has been burned in the river of years. To put it mildly, nowadays, if we want to find some information from the past, we need to go overseas to borrow orphan tomes. Zhang Yi crossed his legs and said calmly to Qin Shigong, the underground world beneath Qinling Mountain is very vast and terrifying. I'm afraid that it's difficult to develop and research on it just by your Xinjing region alone. So if there is relevant information, it would be best for us to participate in the research together. Qin Shigong nodded, this is of course. I'm willing to share all the Yuan stone veins with you, and you can also send people to mine them together. Why should I hide anything from you guys? Zhang Yi thought about it, and it was indeed true. When the time came for the 4 major regions to jointly exploit the Yuan stone veins in Ghost Valley, Xinjing region wouldn't be able to do so by quietly entering the underground and exploring the underground world. It looked like even if Qin Shigong was hiding something from them, Xingjing didn't know much about the underground world. Li Changgong, however, said, "Then I demand that you open up the information in the national collection to us, including those ancient books that are not released to the public, and the secrets that the archaeological team has researched." Li Changgong knew Xingjing quite well, and some things Zhang Yi and Han Shanzhua did not understand, but could not hide from him. There were many secrets that were only in the hands of the top brass of Xingjing and of very few researchers. Qin Shigong nodded. "This won't be a problem, I will share that information with you afterward. The underground world is a huge treasure trove, we should work together to study it thoroughly. In this way, we can ensure that Huashu Kingdom remains powerful and on top of the world during the Ice Age." Next, it was time to talk about compensation payments and the division of materials. Xingjing region's sincerity was more than sufficient. They were at a disadvantage after all, so the xenomorph origin that they had acquired, they simply withdrew from dividing it up. In this way, it was Jiangnan, northeast and northwest, dividing 30% of the Yuan stone veins and 2 of the mutant beast's origin. This included 16,000 points of the centipede queen's origin, as well as 20,000 points of half of the centipede king's origin. How it was divided was a matter for the 3 Zhang Yi. The 3 of them looked at me and I looked at you, all hesitating in their hearts. The Yuan stone vein was extremely valuable, and the epsilon origin was also extremely rare. The former was able to increase the productivity of one's region, allowing the overall region to increase in strength. The latter, however, could directly allow the 3 to take another step forward in their strength. Comparatively speaking, however, mutant beasts' origins were even rarer. Because Yuan stone was energy, it had alternatives, such as fossil fuel, which Zhang Yi did not urgently need for the time being. It was a good thing that made it very difficult to choose, and no matter which one he gave up, it was expected to be heartbreaking. Li Changgong quietly clenched his fists and stared at Zhang Yi and Han Shanzhua, saying, "I'm willing to give up my share of the Yuan stone vein in exchange for a copy of the mutant beast's origin." After losing to Zhang Yi, he was even more eager to improve his strength. And it was clear to anyone how rare Epsilon's origin was. If he missed this opportunity, there might not be a next time. Compared to making the region stronger as a whole, it was still most important to prioritize improving his own strength and solidifying his rule. When Li Changgong said this, Han Shanzhua's frown tightened. "If you say that, I'll have to listen to Chaos's opinion. Youngster, there are only 2 copies of the mutant beast's origin in total, so one of us must spill the beans. What do you think?" Han Shanzhua looked towards Zhang Yi, his heart torn while intending to see Zhang Yi's attitude. Chapter 12:22 30% Yuan Stone. Zhang Yi frowned deeply with a thoughtful look. However, in reality, his mind was the most peaceful. Thus this time, his harvest was undoubtedly the highest in the 4 regions. Just from the dozen or so tall mountains he had piled up in dimensional space, there were massive veins of Yuan stone. Not to mention, there were also a large number of Earth centipede corpses that he had collected. Earth centipedes fed on Yuan stone veins, and after devouring them, their own corpses were highly purified energy. And the most crucial thing was that he had obtained a purple crystal that everyone could only dream of. Having already reaped a full harvest, he could certainly make his choice with ease. According to theory, 30% of the Yuan stone veins would have been what they deserved. Then there were only 2 copies of the mutant beast's origin for the 3 of them to split. After Zhang Yi pondered for a while, he felt that it was still the Yuan stone vein that was more valuable to him at the moment. While others might not be aware of it, Zhang Yi went deeper into the underground world before realizing that the Yuan stone vein was even larger than what was detected in the Xingjing region, at least a dozen times more than what was predicted. What's more, Zhang Yi's strength was already strong enough, and absorbing origin again was not cost-effective. However, obtaining the Yuan stone vein was able to rapidly increase the overall strength of the entire Tianhai city. Incidentally, it would enhance the strength of all the Jiangnan region a bit. He knew the scruples in Li Changgong and Han Shanzhua's hearts. The Yuan stone veins were certainly important, but in their eyes, the mysterious existence of the underground world was always a hidden danger. Thus forcibly mining it, there was no telling how much trouble it would cause in the future. Instead, the mutant beast's origin did not have any side effects and was obtained as a stabilizer. In case something went wrong underneath the Ghost Valley again in the future, Zhang Yi's seemingly obtaining 30% of the Yuan stone vein could be a basket case. After thinking for a while, facing the eyes of Han Shanzhua and Li Changgong, he slowly said with his arms clasped, "I also want it if it's the origin. If you want to take it, you must first give it." Zhang Yi purposely didn't state his attitude, letting Han Shanzhua and Li Changgong get anxious first, lest they back out. Sure enough, upon hearing this, Han Shanzhua became a bit anxious. "If you're going to say that, I choose to want the origin as well." Zhang Yi sneered, "But there are just 2 copies of the origin, how can we split it?" Han Shanzhua said, "I can also give up my share of the Yuan stone vein, but I have to have a share of the origin." Li Changgong looked at Zhang Yi and suddenly said, "Chaos, you didn't take advantage of the opportunity to scavenge when you were in the underground world. You've gotten enough benefits, so let us choose first this time." The others weren't blind to what Zhang Yi had done, they all saw it in their eyes. It was just that fighting was the main focus at those times. None of them poked and prodded. Zhang Yi's expression was somewhat hesitant. "The Yuan stone vein is indeed important. Our Jiangnan region is relatively weak and needs to boost its power. But that origin I'm a bit reluctant to give up." Seeing Zhang Yi's attitude wavering, Li Changgong and Han Shanzhua hurriedly came to persuade. "Your strength is strong enough for all of us to see. Why don't you consolidate the power of the region first? Let us have the origin this time. As you can see, our ability to defend ourselves in the face of danger is clearly inferior to yours, and is indeed more necessary." Zhang Yi hesitated for a long while before he nodded helplessly and silently. "Just this once, I'll let you guys take advantage of it for good." Li Changgong and Han Shanzhua let out a long sigh of relief in their hearts. If Zhang Yi really insisted on fighting with them, they would undoubtedly fall into a disadvantage. This was because both origins were actually kept among Zhang Yi's dimensional space. Moreover, if they really wanted to fight, Zhang Yi's strength would still be able to steadily overwhelm them. This was something that the duo had acknowledged in their hearts since the end of the battle in the underground world. Thus, the matter was resolved perfectly. Zhang Yi handed over 2 copies of the origin to Li Changgong and Han Shanzhua, while he was given 30% of the Ghost Valley Yuan stone vein. Everyone got what they needed, and this matter was considered to have come to an end for the time being. Only for that mysterious underground world, all of them harbored complicated thoughts. With Huashu Kingdom's current strength, it was obviously impossible to deeply explore that realm. White Dragon's strength was too powerful, and obliterating a chariot-level mutant was like an adult bullying a child. No one dared to touch that forbidden realm again. Even if they knew that there was a huge treasure there, they could only look at it. After the meeting ended, everyone returned to their own residences. This matter was over, and although there were many dangers in between, the scourge that was the Earth Centipede community had finally been eliminated. Each family had received a reward that satisfied them, so they could not continue to stay in Xinjiang and were about to embark on their homeward journey. Zhang Yi was also ready to bring everyone back to the Jiangnan region. He had a huge secret in his hand, the purple crystal that Totoro had stolen for him. He knew that the value of this item was incalculable. However, he couldn't figure out what this thing actually did for the time being. It had to be brought back and studied properly before he could do so. On the other hand, the Xinjiang region's side, as promised, had also shared some secret information with them, which included records of mysterious events from earlier years, as well as mutants' research information. These documents were too confusing, so Zhang Yi handed them over to Yang Xinxin to study them on his behalf. "I always feel that these mysterious underground existences are related to our ancestors," Zhang Yi said to Yang Xinxin. "Do you think that they could be our human ancestors? Did they create us?" Yang Xinxin sniffed and said noncommittally, "It is not that there is no such possibility. If the serpent people are the gods of ancient legends, then the human-headed, snake-bodied image deities in myths around the world can be explained. But there are also many questions that are difficult to explain. For example, why do they inhabit the underground? and there are few records of them among the ages. It's as if they're deliberately avoiding contact with us. There's also the mysterious creatures of Misty Valley, as well as the Totoro. They seem to be close to the mysterious serpents of Ghost Valley, but they are distinctly different. Zhang Yi took a deep breath. The more I think about it, the more troublesome it gets. I always feel that this world is hiding some sort of great secret. Yang Xinxin glanced at Zhang Yi and laughed. Perhaps no one is deliberately hiding something, it's just that we don't stand tall enough and thus can't see the truth. Zhang Yi touched his nose and said helplessly, I originally thought that I was strong enough nowadays, and with such power, I would definitely be able to live a good life in the midst of this broken world. But the sudden appearance of the unknown has again put me in a state of trepidation. Yang Xinxin hung her head and said softly, then, just keep getting stronger. All fears come from the lack of one's own strength. Zhang Yi nodded, I feel the same way. With the Yuan stone vein obtained from Xingjing, as well as the mysterious purple crystal, Zhang Yi felt that he and the people around him would be able to become stronger once again. It's time to leave. Zhang Yi said as such. Chapter 1223 Investment. Zhang Yi and Yang Xinxin returned to their residence and informed the crowd that they could prepare to return to Tianhai City. Karen, I'll leave this Yuan stone vein thing to you. It's a new type of energy source, and I believe it will be of great help to your research on mechs and large-scale weapons. Zhang Yi looked towards Lu Karen. This was his valuable technology tree. In the future, Zhang Yi would need to take 2 lines to enhance his power. The acquisition of the epsilon-level origin was too difficult, so it would be from the technology route. Zhang Yi was looking forward to Lu Karen's ideal humanoid mech. Thermal weapons would not disappear from the end of the world, it would just transform into a new form to better adapt to the new world. Lu Karen nodded, brother, you can rest assured. With this new type of energy, my mecha will also take shape faster. Her eyes were burning brightly as she tried to hold up her barren chest, wanting to prove her abilities. Deng Shintong sat on the sofa to the side, crossing his legs and said to Zhang Yi, this time, your harvest has exceeded expectations, a full 30% of Yuan stone veins. These energy sources are far from being used up by your Tianhai City, do you want to consider? He gave a wink towards Zhang Yi, clearly wanting to make a deal. Zhang Yi still owed the Tang family a favor. Hearing Deng Shintong say that, he said indifferently, 30% of the Yuan stone vein, half of it was promised well to Zhu Zheng. The remaining portion, we indeed cannot use up all of it in Tianhai City. But since this is a trade, what can your Tang family offer me? Deng Shintong said, in the field of genetic drug research, the Deng clan's technology is the topmost in the entire Huashu kingdom. He looked at Zhang Yi with a burning gaze. I can help you by creating a powerful mutant beast army. He reached out and pointed at Zhang Yi, just utilize those Yuan stones in your hands. Artificial mutant technology had existed since the beginning of the end times, and it was still developing rapidly. The power of technology would rapidly increase with the need. In the Ice Age, mastering the power of mutants was mastering everything. That's why all the forces around the world were frantically engaging in an arms race in the mutant field. Mutant modification experiments, genetic drug development, were all going crazy. And Tang's technology was at the forefront of Huashu Kingdom in this area. Deng Shintong himself was the best proof. What? You're saying that Deng Shintong's supernatural ability index is only 9,500 points, and that he's weak? Don't kid yourself. Being able to cultivate a pampered rich second generation into a strong mutant was already no small miracle. Deng Shintong wasn't weak, and as the successor of the Deng group, it was impossible to desperately use technology and ruthless work on him. If the technology was used without considering the consequences and at the expense of his lifespan, it was possible for Deng Shintong to reach 9,800 or even 9,900 points at this point. Even nowadays, his abilities had an extremely high growth rate and were just still being developed. In comparison, most of the mutants who were at the same time as him had huge hidden dangers in their bodies. For example, Bian Junwu, who had sacrificed his lifespan in exchange for great power, Li Long, who had been transformed into an android as a whole, and Gluttony, Lu Huang, who had already lost his human form. Nearly 2 years after the end of the world, Deng's technology's genetic technology was also advancing by leaps and bounds, and secretly, it was unknown how many mutants they had utilized for experiments. The current them might only have Epsilon's domain still untouchable. But creating mutants in large quantities would not be a big problem, provided that a lot of consumables would be sacrificed. Zhang Yi looked at Deng Shintong, took a silent sip of tea, and asked, "How high is the yield rate?" Deng Shintong rubbed the back of his hand. With the generalized technology, the yield rate has been able to reach 30%. That means that roughly out of 3, only 2 mutants will be scrapped, and the remaining mutants will be able to grow rapidly if they can withstand the experiments. Zhang Yi said, "The population of Tianhai City is just over 10,000 now, and we have to remove some of the ones that don't have the potential to mutate. In that case, it can't afford to be tossed around." Deng Shintong said, "The problem of population is easy to solve. The last thing Huashu Kingdom lacks is people. Even now, the Jiangnan region has a population of around 20 million. Giving those who are struggling to die a chance is more than they can ask for. After all, if you don't do it, there are plenty of others who will. Man, you're so strong now that the population of the neighboring cities can be relocated there any time you want. Are you still short of consumables to use?" Hearing these words, Zhang Yi silently drank tea and thought for a while. Setting up his own mutant beast army? It seemed like a good suggestion, and with the current population of Tianhai City, and the latest Yuan stone vein Zhang Yi had obtained, it was enough to feed dozens of times the population. However, the problem was that as soon as the number of people increased, trouble would arise. Moreover, the so-called mutant beast army didn't have much of a role to play in the middle of a truly top-notch battle. To Epsilon, no amount of lower mutants would mean much. Even with 9,000 plus Inhumans, it would be extremely difficult to pile up a white chariot-level Epsilon who had just stepped into the doors by sheer numbers. Maintaining order and whatnot, it's better to leave it to Blizzard City to manage. I don't have the slightest interest in it," Zhang Yi said indifferently. He didn't want to be like Zhu Zheng, who was busy with all sorts of things every day. He was not a person who was keen on getting power. Deng Shintong shook his head helplessly when he saw that the cooperation proposal did not pass. "That's a pity, Zhang Yi, you have so many superior conditions, yet you only want to live in peace and be a peaceful public. Do you know how jealous I am of you?" Deng Shintong said from the bottom of his heart. If it was him, I'm afraid that he would have become the king of Jiangnan just like Li Changgong by now. People have their own aspirations, Zhang Yi said indifferently. However, I can give your Deng family a portion of the Yuan stone vein. Zhang Yi looked at Deng Shintong and spoke leisurely. Deng Shintong's eyes instantly lit up. Good. Excited, he looked at Zhang Yi and asked in confusion, "What do you want if you don't want the Deng clan's genetic technology help?" Zhang Yi smiled. "This is an investment." He had already tasted the sweetness in Lu Karen's body, and at this point, he knew that science and technology was the first productive force. Now that it was only the early stage of the end times, mutants created by genetic engineering had appeared on a large scale. In the future, when the genetic technology matured, it would definitely be of great use. That was why Zhang Yi wanted to take a stake in Teng's technology and become a shareholder of Teng's technology. Deng Shintong's eyes flashed through a wisp of essence. He did not give Zhang Yi a reply. Instead, he pondered for a while before saying to Zhang Yi, "I need to discuss this matter with my eldest uncle first. After all, I can't be the one to make the decision on such a big matter." Zhang Yi said indifferently, "I'll wait for your reply. But I believe he has no reason to refuse." Chapter 1224 Happy Cooperation. Of course the Deng family had no reason to refuse, and soon Deng Shintong discussed with Deng Yuanbo and received a response that agreed to the business. Deng Yuanbo said to Deng Shintong, "It's not that Zhang Yi needs us, but we need Zhang Yi's support. For such a long time, we have worked hard for one song to maintain our friendship with Zhang Yi in exchange for this opportunity. When he becomes a shareholder of Deng's technology, it's like he's become someone on our side. he will become our strongest backing. Not to mention that he has given us such great wealth. Even if he didn't, I would still give him shares. And that 0.5% of yuan or given to us this time is actually him supporting us. Deng Yuanbo saw things very clearly. He saw through Zhang Yi's idea of taking out the excess materials in his hands and making a long-term investment. It was also a bit breathless to say the least. A newly discovered energy source like yuan stone was enough to make any power in the world rush for it. Zhang Yi, on the other hand, was generous enough to take out 0.5% of yuan stone veins as soon as he did so because he had too much energy in his hands to use it all up. However, Zhang Yi was not squandering. He did not have any characters around him who were engaged in biogenetic research. Zhou Qian was only a doctor and knew some medicine. The field of biology, on the other hand, could be even more complex and deeper into the microscopic realm than machinery. It would only work if it was left to a professional. And the Deng family was the most ideal person to work with. Zhang Yi had been acquainted with the Deng family for a long time. They had given Zhang Yi a lot of help, and Zhang Yi did not have a chance to return the favor. So he took this opportunity to return the favor and make an investment in the meantime. It was a 2-for-1 deal. After Deng Shintong received Deng Yuanbo's reply, he immediately found Zhang Yi to relay it. Deng's Technologies research on mutations is ongoing in one capital, although for Epsilon's field, due to the lack of samples, it's impossible to do in-depth research. But below Delta, our research is already relatively mature. All of these technologies can be open to you. Zhang Yi nodded, happy cooperation. Deng Shintong smiled, happy cooperation. During the trip to Xinjiang, Zhang Yi's harvest was the biggest, and the others also had notable gains. Liang Yu, Flower and the others had honed their practical combat experience after this battle, and they had devoured quite a few mutant beasts' origins. It was thought that after they returned, their strength would all be improved. Only, Fatty Su was a sullen man, locking himself in his room, not daring to come out of the doors. Zhang Yi of course knew that he was avoiding Liang Yang. Yang Yanli also understood this, and in recent times, he didn't appear near Zhang Yi and their residence. Instead, he let others take care of the food and living on his behalf. Zhang Yi was planning to leave Xinjiang. That's why he found Fatty Su again and finally asked him about his inner thoughts. Hey, Fatty. What exactly are you thinking? Even if you don't agree, you still have to give people an answer, right? This is basic courtesy. Fatty Su raised his head, a face written with haggardness and a beard that hadn't been shaved for a few days. Boss, He opened his mouth, wanting to speak. Zhang Yi laughed, make up your own mind. Time is running out for you. He doesn't get involved in emotional matters. Before leaving, someone from Xinjiang found Zhang Yi, and it was Qin Qigong who wanted to talk to Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi went to Ming Dynasty City and found Qin Qigong in his office. Qin Qigong opened the door and confessed the purpose of calling him here. The issue of the Earth Centipede colony underneath Ghost Valley has been resolved, but we know nothing about the mysterious existence of the underground world. That's why the next exploitation of the Yuan stone veins will also require a certain amount of risk. Now that 30% of the share has fallen into the hands of your Jiangnan region, then to mine the veins, you will also have to send people to help. Zhang Yi nodded when he heard Qin Qigong say this. Very reasonable, there was no such thing as a free lunch in the world, mining the vein was also a hard work, they couldn't possibly wait for the distribution for nothing. What's more, if they don't send someone over to supervise, what if at that time the Xinjiang side doesn't follow the rules and gives them less ore? After we go back, I'll have the region send someone over to participate in the work. Zhang Yi said indifferently. As for the mysterious existence in the underground world of Qinling Mountain, I don't think it will become a threat to us in a short time. Qin Qigong looked at Zhang Yi curiously. Oh? Why do you think so? With a smile on his face, he seemed to agree with Zhang Yi's opinion, but he still wanted Zhang Yi to tell about it. Zhang Yi recalled his experience in the underground world that day, and there were a few doubts among his eyes. I can't say for sure, there are too many things unknown to humans. But I was able to sense that the white snake we encountered that day did not have any killing intent towards us. Otherwise, I'm afraid none of us would have survived that day. The white dragon struck out at Zhang Yi's Westerners, firstly causing the 3 Li Changgong to be seriously injured. It appeared to be a vicious strike, but Zhang Yi later thought about it carefully and realized that he had not killed at all. Otherwise, even he would have to die in the underground world. White Dragon's behavior was more like a deterrent to drive them away from the underground world. And there's one more thing, you guys have been mining the underground Yuan stone veins for so long, it's impossible for them not to have noticed. If they really wanted to strike, they would have done so long ago. Zhang Yi voiced his inner thoughts. Qin Shigong smiled and nodded after pondering over his words for a long while. Your argument makes sense, which makes me a lot more solid. However, he said with his hands behind his back and a bemused look on his face, even if we know that there are dangers there, it's impossible for the mining of the Yuan stone vein to stop. Zhang Yi hugged his arms and looked at Qin Shigong curiously. How so? Qin Shigong laughed. In the face of great benefits, taking certain risks is completely worth it. Besides, even if there's an accident, at most some miners will be sacrificed. The miners sent there are all muggles with no supernatural potential. Exchanging their lives for Yuan stone veins is a completely cost-effective deal. Such cold words came out of Qin Shigong's mouth, but Zhang Yi was not surprised at all. Those who could achieve great things could not have women's benevolence, and those who were soft-hearted were afraid that they would not survive more than 2 months after the end of the world. Zhang Yi suddenly thought of a possibility and asked with a smile, no more they still have the ability to procreate, perhaps the offspring of these people's procreation will give birth to advanced mutants? Qin Shigong shook his head with a smile. The abilities of the first-generation mutants come from heavenly gifts and hard work, and there is still the possibility of reversing heaven's destiny. But the second generation, the genes inherited are from their parents. Muggles give birth to little muggles, and the probability of a powerful mutant giving birth to a powerful offspring is also higher. It's enough to leave only a limited number of ordinary people to keep the offspring they give birth to as laborers. Too many would only be a burden on society. Of course, too few won't work either. We mutants, after all, need to have the underclass to serve us as well. Chapter 1225, Going to the Banquet. The mining of Yuan stone veins would definitely continue. This was something Zhang Yi had thought about and would send people over to supervise. In addition, the Jiangnan region would also need to send people over to avoid anyone playing tricks when it came to distribution. After chatting about these things, Zhang Yi bid farewell to Qin Shigong, intending to return to Jiangnan region. Qin Shigong sent Zhang Yi away after some polite words. Zhang Yi returned to his place of residence, and from afar, he saw 2 beautiful women dressed in snowy ethnic costumes standing at the doors, waiting silently in the wind and snow. As soon as he arrived, the 2 women immediately greeted him. Your Excellency Chaos. Zhang Yi recognized them as the ladies-in-waiting beside Pa Jigsaw. The old thing was ugly and fat, but the maid beside him was young and beautiful. What is the matter that brought you here? Zhang Yi asked with a smile. One of the maids of honor arched her hand towards Zhang Yi. My master has prepared a celebration banquet for you, and has asked the 2 of us to come and invite you to come. Zhang Yi came to a realization. He then thought of what Pa Jigsaw had once told him before he set off for Qinling Mountain. But he had forgotten about it after returning. I originally thought that he was just being polite and courteous, but I didn't expect to come for real. Zhang Yi muttered. For that fatty from the southwest region, Zhang Yi didn't have much good feelings, but he couldn't say that he hated it either. After all, he was too lazy to care about other people's affairs. However, Pa Jigsaw had always treated him with respect, and Zhang Yi was not in a position to refuse what he had promised in the first place. But out of caution, he said to the duo, Pa Jitusi has prepared a sumptuous dinner. I can't enjoy it alone. Can I bring my family along? The 2 maids looked at each other, then arched their hands at Zhang Yi and smiled. Of course. Lord Pa Ji has said that this dinner is prepared for you and your family and friends. Zhang Yi laughed, then asked the 2 to wait in front of the doors, while he himself returned to his residence and called everyone. The crowd did not feel much surprise when they heard that Pa Jigsaw had invited them for dinner. After all, with Zhang Yi's strength and status at this point, anyone would want to flatter him. Maybe it's just an ordinary dinner. Let's just go there. Shou Qiu held Zhang Yi's arm and laughed. Yan Xinxin also nodded in agreement. Zhang Yi smiled and said, "Anyway, since someone is entertaining us, we'll go there together. You guys don't have to say it, Pachi's family has a very good cook. His cooking is so soul-stirring that even thinking about it now makes me drool." It wasn't as if Zhang Yi had never eaten delicious food, but the cook Pa Jigsaw brought along with him, Pa Jig Luodan, was a gourmet-type mutant. The meals he cooked were extraordinarily delicious, and even the best state banquet chef in Xinjiang paled in comparison. Although he didn't know if Pa Jigsaw had a special purpose, it wasn't bad for the big group to go over together as if it was the last sumptuous meal before leaving Xinjiang. The group came down to the southwest region's temporary residence under the guidance of 2 maids of honor. Before they even entered the mansion, they could vaguely smell the tantalizing aroma in the air. Flower, curled up in Yang Xinxin's embrace, couldn't even help but raise her head, her eyes wide and blooming as she carefully searched for the source of the odor. The people inside rushed over to inform Zhang Yi when they saw him arrive. Soon Pa Jigsaw dragged his obese body and ran out to greet him with a smile on his face. "Honorable Lord Chaos, as well as his family and friends, thank you very much for coming here. I, Pa Jigsaw, am honored." Pa Jigsaw bowed to Zhang Yi with courteous manners. Zhang Yi hurriedly went over to assist him to get up. "There's no need to be too polite, Pa Ji Tusi, it's only that we have to thank you for the elaborate dinner." After some courtesies, Pa Jigsaw led Zhang Yi and the others in front and then entered inside the house. As Zhang Yi and the others entered the house, their eyes were all over the surroundings. The people from the southwest region were all wearing ethnic clothing that was characteristic of the region. On their bodies were cotton robes with sleeves that could be removed, and on their heads, their hair was tied up with a turban or a tie rope. Inside the clothes, however, the horns of high-tech combat uniforms could still be seen. The crowd walked into the interior of the house, which was served by a clear line of young and beautiful maids. Compared to Shou Qiu and the others, their face value could naturally only be considered clear. However, in the snowy plateau, this kind of appearance was not uncommon, and some of the women were probably found from the Sichuan and Chongqing regions in the southwest, with an appearance that was obviously white and fresh. As soon as a few people entered the house, they were served by them with extra attentiveness. Fatty Sue, who had been emotionally frustrated recently, was all surrounded by the 2 maids and helped him take off his jacket. Fatty Sue was flattered and looked at them, then couldn't help but shake his head. In terms of face value and gentleness and loveliness, they were much worse than Li Yang. It's true that when a man is flirty, there's nothing for a woman to do. Fatty Sue thought so inwardly. Zhang Yi and the others were seated at a huge round table in the center. The host, Pa Jigsaw, sat at the first place and Zhang Yi sat at the second place. Soon after the guests arrived, the prepared meal was also brought to the table by the maids. This meal was incomparably sumptuous. Zhang Yi had eaten many exquisite dishes, but he had to admit that it was completely incomparable to this meal. The moment the cover was unveiled, the wide array of dishes just looked appetizing, not to mention the overwhelming aroma that came to his nose. Zhang Yi quietly swallowed his saliva, which was a normal physiological reaction after seeing the food. He was not the only one, everyone else basically looked the same. With a wave of his hand, Pa Jigsaw received a leather pouch from the maid and personally poured a cup of barley wine for Zhang Yi and the others. "This is the best wine from our snowy plateau, please also taste it," Pa Jigsaw said with a smile. This humble attitude made it completely impossible to pick a fault. He raised the cup in his hand himself. "Thank you all for your appreciation, this cup of wine is my toast to you all." After saying that, he picked up the wine cup and drank it all in one go. Zhang Yi looked at the cup in his hand and hesitated slightly before also taking a sip. Everyone in Zhang Yi's family would take antivirus on a daily basis to prevent accidental poisoning or being poisoned. Pushing the cups during the meeting, Pa Jigsawn's attitude was extraordinarily attentive, and if he hadn't seen his attitude towards his subordinates with his own eyes before, it would be hard for people to believe that this was a Tusi of Southwest region with an honorable status. Zhang Yi looked at Pa Jigsawn, and in his heart, he immediately felt some doubts. The Southwest region was very special. Due to the existence of Tantra, the capital, there was a system of unity of government and religion. The outside world would not easily interfere. On this trip to Xinjiang, he had only sent the number 3 to express an attitude. Pa Jigsawn, however, showed too much affection for him. This kind of treatment was something that the representatives of the other regions did not have.